Briarwood Lane was the kind of neighborhood where people smiled at each other in passing, but rarely engaged in anything more than pleasantries. The houses stood in neat rows, identical in their suburban charm, with manicured lawns and warm porch lights that flickered on as dusk settled. Nothing much ever happened in Briarwood, at least not until Mr. Solomon disappeared. He had been the old man at the end of the cul-de-sac, the one who rarely spoke but always seemed to be watching. His house, once pristine, had started to decay over the years, paint peeling, grass growing wild. Yet, despite his reclusive nature, everyone knew Mr. Solomon. He had been there the longest, after all. It wasn't until his mailbox overflowed with untouched letters that people realized something was wrong. Then came the smell, an acrid, rotting scent that made neighbors wrinkle their noses as they passed. The authorities were called, but when they arrived, there was no sign of Mr. Solomon. No body, no evidence of foul play, just an empty, dust-laden house with doors that creaked in protest whenever touched. And that's when the strange things began. Ethan Clark had never paid much attention to Mr. Solomon. He was too busy balancing work, his failing relationship, and the stress of living paycheck to paycheck. But something about the old man's disappearance unsettled him. Maybe it was the way his house now seemed darker than the others, its windows resembling empty eye sockets. The night after the police left, Ethan heard something, a whisper, faint but persistent, like a breath against his ear. He turned toward his bedroom window, which faced Mr. Solomon's house, but saw nothing except its hollow silhouette under the moonlight. Unable to shake the feeling, Ethan ventured outside. The air was thick, damp, carrying an unnatural stillness. As he reached Mr. Solomon's front yard, the whispering grew clearer, though he still couldn't make out words. Then the porch light flickered on, though no one was inside. Ethan bolted back to his house, locking the door behind him. Days passed, and Briarwood Lane tried to return to normal. The mail was collected, the authorities ruled Mr. Solomon as a missing person, and the neighborhood fell back into its quiet routine. But Ethan couldn't ignore the unease that festered inside him. He wasn't alone. People started vanishing. First, the teenage girl who walked her dog every evening, then the mailman who had been delivering letters for years. Each time, there was no sign of struggle, no evidence, just empty homes and unanswered questions. One night, Ethan woke to the sound of his own front door creaking open. Heart pounding, he grabbed the baseball bat from under his bed and crept downstairs. The air inside his home felt wrong, as if something else had slithered inside. The TV flickered static, though he hadn't turned it on. Then he saw it, a shadow shifting against the far wall, not cast by any light, but moving on its own, and it was watching him. The whispers grew louder, the shadows more distinct, and then one night, Ethan saw his own reflection blink when he hadn't. He screamed, and then, nothing. The next morning, Briarwood Lane was quiet once more. Ethan's house sat empty, his belongings untouched. Neighbors shook their heads, muttering about another person leaving without notice. New people moved in, life continued, but Mr. Solomon's house remained, watching, waiting, and the whispers never stopped.